Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om.
Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om.
Shri Rama Jaya Rama Jaya Jaya Rama 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 Om.
Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. I am sure all that you wanted to know has been fully realized, since you produced the most wonderful Mahabharata, which fully deals with all the objects of human pursuit. You have also investigated the truth of and realized the eternal Brahman, the Absolute. Nevertheless, my Lord, you bewail your lot as if you have not realized the object of your life. Vyasa replied, all that you said about me is true, yet I find no satisfaction. Everything is clear to you as your knowledge is unfathomable, and you are the son of Brahma himself. Please tell me the latent cause of my dissatisfaction. You know all hidden truths because you have worshipped the Supreme Lord Sri Narayana, who is the ruler of both Prakriti and Purusha, and who by his very thought creates, sustains, and reabsorbs the universe with the help of the gunas, remaining unattached to the same. You go about all the three worlds as the sun does, and moving within all like the vital air, you can read the minds of all. I, who have, by the practice of yoga and the observance of sacred vows, fully realized the Supreme Brahman, the Absolute, and Brahman in the form of the Vedas, still pray to you to point out to me my serious flaws. Narada replied, beloved sage Vyasa, because you have failed to sing the stainless glories of the Lord adequately, I consider that you have not touched the aspect of devotion at all. And therefore, your knowledge is incomplete. If one's wisdom fails to praise the Lord and His glories, it is no wisdom at all, even if it describes everything eloquently. In the Mahabharata epic, you have dealt with, in great detail, the object of human pursuit, such as dharma, etc. But you have not described the glory of Bhagavan Vasudeva as beautifully as you should have done. People may make scholarly speeches in lucid language and with figurative expressions. But if such speeches do not contain the praises of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Lord, they delight only people immersed in sense enjoyments, like the crows that enjoy feeding upon the dirty leavings of food. Such speeches never satisfy or give joy to the devotees of the Lord, who have taken shelter at His lotus feet, like the swans that delight only in the lotus beds of the Mansarovar lake. On the other hand, one's composition, even if it is faulty in diction, will wipe out the sins of people, if it consists of verses, each of which contains the all-powerful names of the Lord and expresses His glory. It is such a composition that pious men love to hear, sing, or repeat to an audience. So also, pure wisdom, which is a direct means to the attainment of liberation, does not serve its purpose if it is devoid of devotion to the Lord. When such is the case, what can we say of action done with an interested motive and which is rooted in sorrow at every stage? That is, both while it is being performed and at the time of its fruition, and also even of disinterested action that has not been dedicated to God. Can these be beneficent in any way to heighten one's glory? O highly blessed Vyasa, you are devoted to truth and are steadfast in your resolve. Therefore, with a concentrated mind, you may recall the exploits of Sri Hari, the Supreme Lord, with a view to liberation of the entire humanity. Whoever desires to talk about anything except the Lord's Leela and the glory of His name falls into the trap of manifold names and forms evolved by such desires. The result will be that he will see only diversity everywhere. In the Mahabharata, you have prescribed horrible acts involving destruction of life in the name of religion for men who are naturally addicted to such acts. This was a great error on your part. Misguided by these precepts of yours, the ordinary man of the world would take it that such acts are pious, and he would refuse to honor the teachings that prohibit such actions. Therefore, kindly narrate the exploits of the Lord and describe fully the greatness and glory of His name for the good of those who are influenced by the three gunas and who lack spiritual sense. Evil never comes to a devotee who adores the lotus feet of the Lord, neglecting his own duty. Even if he falls from his sadhana or dies before he is fully ripe in his devotion. On the other hand, has any purpose been achieved by those who have devotion to their duty but who fail to worship God? A wise man should strive only for that object which cannot be attained by going round from the highest to the lowest regions. He does not have to strive for the pleasures of senses. As such, pleasures come to him as a matter of course, as sorrow comes as a result of past actions. Dear Vyasa, a servant of the Lord, even if by accident turns adverse to him at any time, does never return to this world of birth and death like others who are averse to the Lord's worship. Recalling the joy of having once embraced the Lord's lotus feet and tasted their sweetness, he would not think of abandoning them. This universe is the manifested form of the Lord Himself. Yet, who is yet apart from it, being responsible for its creation, preservation, and dissolution? You know this yourself. Yet I have indicated it to you by way of a hint. O Vyasa of unfailing vision, know it for yourself that you are a ray of the Supreme Spirit, and that, though unborn, you have taken birth for the good of the world. Please therefore describe at full length the Leela of the all-merciful Lord, so that love and devotion to God may be created in men, and they may aspire for the highest good. The wise have declared that the most important purpose of man's intense penance, sacred knowledge, performance of sacrificial rites, recitation of Vedas, etc., is to recount the virtues of that all gracious and all powerful God who is our sole refuge. During the last kalpa, in my previous existence, O sage, my mother was the maid servant of some Brahmins who were well versed in Vedas. Even when I was a young boy, I was blessed with the rare privilege of serving some saints who were wandering ascetics. They had desired to stop at one place during the rainy season, as was their custom. Though I was a mere child, I was free from childish frolics and was quite tame and submissive. I spoke very little and remained aloof from playthings. Though the sages loved all alike, they were particularly kind to me. I performed all kinds of service to them with great love and devotion. Knowing the value and purifying power of prasad, and with the willing consent of those saints, I ate once a day whatever was left over, after they had finished their meals. Thus I was cleansed of all sins. The service I rendered to the Mahatmas helped me immensely to attain purity of mind, with the result that I conceived a liking for hearing the praises of God. I became more and more devoted, and I made it a point to listen to the soul-ravishing stories of Sri Krishna, which the pure-hearted sages were singing with great love and devotion. Dear Vyasa, when I heard these wonderful stories with great reverence, I gradually developed an attraction for the Lord, who is the lover of His devotees. When my love for Him increased, my mind got firmly established in that Lord, whose very thought burns all the vasanas from the mind. Through such a mind, I began to perceive the whole of this gross and subtle world as assumed by Maya, in me, the Absolute. Thus my vision gradually changed. I heard thrice every day with rapt attention the holy praises of Sri Krishna as sung by those great sages. Immediately there sprouted in my heart that intense devotion which is powerful enough to eradicate the element of Rajoguna and Tamoguna. I continued to serve the saints with faith, love, and devotion. Though I was only a child, I was modest in bearing, sinless, full of faith, tame and submissive. Compassionate as they were, the worshipful saints, when they were about to depart, graciously imparted to me the esoteric wisdom which has been directly revealed by the Lord Himself. This rare wisdom enabled me to have a clear knowledge of the glory of the deluding potency, Maya of Sri Krishna, the cause of this creation, by knowing which men attain to His highest abode. There is a bhajan which men in the north sing. Mahamaya मैं आया तेरे द्वार अम्बे जगदम्बे जगदम्बे देवी माँ So here Narad Muni talks the deluding potency Maya of Sri Krishna, the cause of this creation, by knowing which men attain to his supreme abode. O sage, I have thus indicated to you the glory of actions dedicated to the Lord, who is the ruler of the universe as well as the absolute Brahman, and how such actions serve to cure most beneficently the threefold agony. O Vyasa of great austerity, any substance that causes a disease cannot itself cure it. But when that very substance is properly medicated, it does cure the ailment. Similarly, all the activities of men ordinarily lead to the continuance of the cycle of birth and death. But the very same actions, when offered to the Lord, lose their binding character and thus help us to attain liberation. So there is hope for us. The attainment of devotion and knowledge depends upon how our duties are performed. Our duties must be completely dedicated to the Lord. Those who dedicated all their actions to God repeatedly utter the sweet name and praises of and meditate on Sri Krishna in the course of performing their actions. The Lord is Mantra Swarupa. O holy sage, when I had thus carried out his behest, Lord Hari blessed me with self-knowledge, mystic powers, and loving devotion to his holy feet. O sage of unlimited knowledge, pray, recount the glories of the beloved Lord, who, having become the entire universe, permeates everything and transcends all. By listening to such praises of the Lord, even the wise ones reach the end of their quest for knowledge. For they realize that there is nothing more to know, and that the chanting of his name and glories alone can give relief to those who are repeatedly tormented by trials and turmoils, and there is no other way. We come to the second chapter. Bhishma merges in the Lord. The terrible Mahabharata war was over. The Pandavas who had chosen to have Sri Krishna on their side had won. And the Kauravas who had Sri Krishna's army on their side and whose desire was to destroy the Pandavas had perished. Bhishma alone lay on the bed of arrows in the battlefield, waiting for the auspicious moment to cast off his body. The pure-hearted King Yudhishthira, instead of being jubilant over the victory, was seized with remorse for his having been instrumental in bringing about the destruction of his own kinsmen. He could not be consoled even by sage Vyasa and others who understood the ways of providence. Even Sri Krishna, who wielded great influence on Yudhishthira, could not lift him out of despondency. Perhaps the Lord wanted this to be done by Bhishma. Brooding over the death of his kinsmen with a bewildered mind and overpowered by affection and infatuation, King Yudhishthira said, "Oh, look at this ignorance rooted in my heart. Evil-minded as I am, I brought about the mass destruction just for the sake of this body, which is after all perishable. For me, there can be no redemption from hell for millions of years for the heinous crime I have committed to children. Brahmins, my own kith and kin, friends, uncles, cousins, and preceptors. Though the scriptures say that for a monarch it is no sin to destroy his enemies for protecting his subjects, they do not satisfy me. The serious wrongs I have done in this life to the women folk by killing or causing to kill their husbands cannot be expiated through sacrificial performances." King Yudhishthira, thus afraid of the wrongs perpetrated against humanity, proceeded to the battlefield of Kurukshetra to meet Bhishma, seeking enlightenment about all sacred duties. Thereupon, all his brothers followed him, Lord Krishna himself rode in a chariot along with Arjuna. Perceiving Bhishma lying on the ground like a god fallen from heaven, the Pandavas and their attendants, as well as Sri Krishna, made obeisance to him. On this occasion, many great sages like Parvata, Narada, Vyasa, and others had also assembled there. Seeing the highly blessed souls, Bhishma, who was well versed in the principles of right conduct, paid his respects to them with due regard to the occasion and place. Bhishma was also well acquainted with the glory of Sri Krishna, the Lord of the universe, who was sitting before him in a personal form, assumed through Maya, and who was also enthroned in his heart. Bhishma paid his homage to him. With eyes full of tears of affection, Bhishma looked at the sons of Pandu, who stood beside him, full of modesty and love, and spoke to them as follows. How painful and how unjust it has been that you, the progeny of righteousness and votaries of the Brahmins, goodness and Lord Krishna, should have lived a life of suffering. Surely you did not deserve to suffer in the way you did. When the great warrior Pandu breathed his last, you were all very young, and your mother Kunti along with you all had to suffer many hardships on your account. I believe that all your unwelcome experiences were attributable to Providence. For the whole world with its guardian deities is ruled over by him as the clouds are by the wind. Is it not strange that you, the son of Dharma, the god of righteousness, having brothers like Bhima and Arjuna, and Lord Sri Krishna himself as friend and well-wisher, should be subject to adverse circumstances and the consequent suffering? Indeed, Sri Krishna's ways are mysterious. No man can discover his intention. Even seers get bewildered in their seeking to know it. Therefore, accepting that all these events depend upon the will of Providence, follow his will and protect the helpless people, as you are their sole monarch. Sri Krishna is God himself. He is none other than the prime person, Lord Narayana. Deluding the world by his Maya, he lives incognito among the people. Only Lord Shiva, the celestial sage Narada, and Kapila know the most hidden glory of Sri Krishna, whom you think to be your cousin, beloved friend, and the greatest well-wisher. Out of great affection for him, you have made him your counselor, envoy, and charioteer. He is the soul of the universe. He is of equal vision. He is one without a second and is free from egotism. He is blemishless. As such, nothing that he does affects him in any way. As such, nothing that he does affects him in any way. Yet, look at his compassion for those who are exclusively devoted to him. In that, Sri Krishna has appeared in person before me at this hour when I am about to shed this body. A yogi who casts off his body with his thought fixed on Lord Sri Krishna through devotion and chanting his name is rid of all hankerings and released from the bondage of actions. May the Lord, who is adorable even for gods and possessed of 4 arms, whose lotus-like countenance beams with gracious smiles and has reddish eyes, and who appears to others only in their meditation, kindly stay on here till I shuffle off this body. In answer to the many questions asked by Yudhishthira, Bhishma, who was lying on the bed of arrows and who had realized the truth, discoursed upon the various duties of men belonging to various classes and stages in life, on the duties of those who are engaged in worldly activities, and also of those who have withdrawn from such activities, on duties obligatory on monarchs, the dharma relating to charitable gifts, the courses of conduct which are conducive to liberation, the duties of women, and the courses of conduct which are intended to propitiate the Lord. He also explained the four ends of human pursuit, namely religious merit, worldly riches, sensuous enjoyment, and final beatitude or liberation, as well as the means to them. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, as well as the means to them. While Bhishma was thus discoursing, there arrived the time which was most auspicious for the yogis to drop their body according to their pleasure, their choice. Thereupon, Bhishma wound up his speech and exclusively fixed his mind, which was absolutely free from worldly attachment, as well as his eyes on Sri Krishna, the Prime Person, who was present before him in his charming form, with four arms and clad in shining yellow robes. Pitambar Odhe. The last traces of sin, if any, left in Bhishma were obliterated by his concentrated thought on the most holy. The pain which he had felt on account of the sharp arrows piercing his body quickly disappeared at a mere glance of the Lord. Now, while casting off his body, he stopped all the activities and wanderings of his senses and extolled Lord Sri Krishna thus. Now, on the eve of my departure from this mortal world, I offer my mind, which is free from all thirst for worldly enjoyments, to the Supreme Lord Krishna, who, while retaining his own blissful character all along, sometimes assumes his own prakriti in order to carry on his sport, from which flows the stream of creation. May I cherish motiveless love for Sri Krishna, who has assumed a personality charming to the three worlds, who is clad in excellent robes, brilliant as the rays of the sun, and whose lotus-like face has curly locks framing it. May my mind, body and soul rest in Sri Krishna, and may I develop love for him, who is the friend of Arjuna, and who at the request of Arjuna drove and placed his chariot in the middle of the Pandava and Kaurava armies, and planting himself there, cut short the life of the hostile warriors by his very looks. May I be blessed with devotion to the Supreme Being, who by imparting spiritual knowledge in the form of the Gita, dispelled the delusion of Arjuna, who on seeing us, the generals of the Kaurava forces, at the van of the hostile army, felt disinclined to kill his own kith and kin, because he regarded a sin. How compassionate is Sri Krishna! He had vowed not to take up arms during the Mahabharata war. But he broke his vow just to fulfill and exalt my woe, which was to compel him to take up arms. For this he jumped down from the chariot and, like a lion, darted towards me with the wheel of his chariot in his hand. Hit with the piercing arrows of a desperado like me and bathed in blood, he rushed forth to kill me, disregarding the remonstrance of Arjuna. May that Lord Krishna be my asylum. May I, in my last moments, develop love for the Lord, who took the responsibility of protecting Arjuna's chariot, and by doing so, enabled the warriors who fell on the battlefield to see him at their last moments, and thereby gave them Sarupa Mukti, that is, attainment of a form similar to his. In an assembly crowded with hosts of sages and foremost princes during the Rajasuya sacrifice performed by Yudhishthira, Sri Krishna, who attracted the eyes of them, had the honor of being worshipped first of all before my very eyes. It is he, the soul of the universe, who has appeared before me at this moment. Having shaken off the foolish idea of diversity, I have realized that unborn Lord, who though one, is severally enthroned in the hearts of all embodied creatures, brought forth by himself. Bhishma, having thus merged his soul with all the activities of a mind, speech, and visual sense in Sri Krishna, the universal soul, shuffled off his mortal coil, his breath being dissolved into the atmospheric air. All glory to Sri Krishna. By the will of the Supreme Lord, Vidura, the brother of Dhritarashtra, had left Hastinapur before the Mahabharata war had broken out. Wandering in faraway Himalayas and visiting the holy signs, he came in contact with sage Maitreya. By asking the sage a number of questions on matters spiritual, he came to know all that had to be learnt even before all the questions were answered by the sage. Exclusive devotion to Sri Krishna welled up in his heart, and he felt no more need to get elucidation on the remaining questions. All his questions had got answered without being asked. Therefore, he returned to Hastinapur, by which time the war was over. It was a great joy to King Yudhishthira, his brothers, and everyone there to see their kinsman Vidura returning home after a long separation, and they went forth to receive him with great love. They embraced him, greeted him, and shed copious tears of love, overwhelmed as they were with anxiety caused by his being away so long. When Vidura was duly seated, Yudhishthira paid his respects to him, and with his head bent low in humility, inquired about his pilgrimage and also about the welfare of Sri Krishna and the Yadavas in Dwaraka. Vidura replied in great detail, but carefully omitted that part of the conversation he had with Uddhava, relating to the extermination of the Yadava race, as he thought the news would break their hearts. See how gentlemanly of Vidura. He feels this news will break their heart. Adored by his kinfolk, Vidura stayed on at Hastinapur for some time, being anxious to do some good to his eldest brother Dhritarashtra. This brought delight to all. King Yudhishthira rejoiced with his powerful younger brothers having got back his kingdom. It was also a matter of great satisfaction for him. He had seen the face of his grandson Parikshit, capable of holding the tradition of the family. Thus time passed on, and they were all engrossed in the worldly activities, having got attached to their homes, and as a consequence lost sight of the supreme goal. Perceiving this state of affairs and being anxious to remind them of their true goal and make them strive to attain it, Vidura approached Dhritarashtra one morning and said, "My dear royal brother, I have come to warn you of the frightening days ahead. Let us be away from here. The all-powerful time, the time of death has come upon us all. We cannot avert it on any account and under any circumstance. Overtaken by it, a man has to part with his life, which is most dear to him, to say nothing of other things like power, position, wealth, and so on. Your uncles, brothers, sons, and other relatives have all been killed. Your body is overcome with old age and your end is nearing. The worst part of it is that you are living under the roof of another, King Yudhishthira, who was your mortal enemy till recently. How strong is the desire in a living being to survive? Impelled by such desire, you accept like a dog even the morsels of food thrown to you by Bhima. What do you expect to achieve by living a life of entire dependence upon the goodwill of those whose dwelling was set on fire, to whom poison was administered, whose wedded wife was subject to ignominy in open court, and whose lands and all other possessions were seized, all with your connivance? Is it not foolish on your part to desire to live any more? Like tattered clothes, your old body will drop off one day or other, however reluctant you may be to cast it off. Therefore, he alone is considered wise, who, free from worldly attachments and shaking off all bondage, drops his body, which is no longer of any use to him, away from and unknown to his kith and kin. He is considered foremost amongst men, if, fed up with this world, either by himself or by another's precept, with a subdued mind and holding Lord Sri Krishna in his heart, He leaves his home as a recluse. I therefore suggest that, unnoticed by your friends and relatives, you should proceed to the Himalayas. These sharp words of Vidura hit the mark. The blind king Yudhishthira had his mind's eye awakened. He could easily cut asunder the strong ties of affection that had bound him to his relatives. He boldly took the advice of Vidura and departed. Vidura accompanied him as his guide. They proceeded toward the Himalayas, which afforded great delight to the recluse. Gandhari too, who had taken a vow of devoted service to her husband, Dhritarashtra, followed him on his journey. After finishing his prayers and other rituals, King Yudhishthira went to pay his respects to his uncle Dhritarashtra as was his custom. But he was shocked to see neither Dhritarashtra, Gandhari nor Vidura there. Highly perturbed, he made inquiries about them but could get no clue from anyone. To bring peace to the disturbed mind of Yudhishthira, there came the divine sage Narada. Seeing whom, the king went forth to receive him, and after greeting him, spoke with great reverence. The king said, "O divine sage, I do not know what happened to my uncles, nor do I know where my aunt, so well known for her austere penance and greatly distressed at the loss of her sons, has gone. Your holiness alone can tell me the truth and save me from this endless ocean of grief." Hearing this, worshipful Narada, the foremost among sages, replied, "O king, grieve not for anybody. The world is under the control of the all-merciful God. It is to him, the supreme ruler of all, that all these worlds, along with their rulers, offer their homage. It is he who unites, and it is he alone who separates living beings from one another. It is he who controls every being and creature. As bullocks are controlled and made to work by small strings passed through their nostrils, so are the human beings tied down to the rope of the divine word, the Vedas. The human beings of different denominations and duties, such as Brahmana, Kshatriya, etc., offer their worship to God through their respective duties. As the playthings in the world are brought together and separated at the will of the player, so do the coming together and parting of human beings depend on the will of God. Human beings may be considered to be eternal as the soul or spirit, or ephemeral as the corporeal body, or both eternal and transient as the embodied souls, or neither eternal nor ephemeral as the inexpressible absolute, which is devoid of all attributes. Nirguna, Nirakar. In any case, they are not worth grieving for, unless through affection and infatuation. Therefore, O Yudhishthira, shake off the uneasiness of mind caused by ignorance as to how your helpless and miserable uncles and aunt are faring without you. This body, made up of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, is subject to the control of time, fate, and the three modes of nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas. How can such a body protect others any more than a man fallen into the jaws of a python help another? In creation, the Lord, who is the protector of all, has so arranged that everyone is taken care of. So why should you feel that your uncles and aunts have to be protected by you? That sense of doership. Mataji says, no, give up sense of doership. Why should you feel that your uncles and aunts have to be protected by you? The Lord takes care of them also. All this, O king, is the one self-effulgent Lord, the self of all embodied souls. It is he who appears as the subject and the object. Perceive him as manifest in multitudinous forms through his elusive power. It is the same Lord who has appeared on the earth as Sri Krishna for the protection of the virtuous and for the extermination of the enemies of God. Don't be under the false impression that Sri Krishna will remain in Dwarka long. The work for which he took this incarnation is almost over, and the Lord awaits the completion of that which yet remains to be done. You too should wait so long as the Lord is still there, still here. Now I shall narrate to you what has happened to your uncle Dhritarashtra. He, with his brother Vidura and wife Gandhari, has reached the hermitage of a sage to the south of the Himalayas, where the holy Ganga has split herself into 7 streams, which they call Sapta Srota. Bathing there thrice a day, Dhritarashtra is doing intense penance according to the scriptural ordinance. He is living only on water. He is serene of mind and is free from all cravings. Sitting in a steady posture, controlling the breath, and withdrawing the 5 external senses and the mind from their objects through contemplation on Lord Krishna, he has shaken off all the impurities of his mind. Merging his ego in buddhi, which is the principle of intelligence and the source of I consciousness, and dissolving the buddhi in the Atman, he has identified himself with the Absolute, the substratum of all. This is just like the space in a jar getting united with the unlimited space. He has thoroughly controlled his senses and mind. He has given up all enjoyments and uprooted even the latent desires. Having abandoned all duties, he sits motionless like a pillar, without any movement within or without. On the 5th day hence, he will cast off his body, which will be reduced to ashes. Finding the body of our Lord being consumed along with the hut he is occupying by the sacrificial fire, his virtuous wife, standing outside, will enter the fire in order to follow her husband. Witnessing this wonder with mixed feelings of joy and grief, Vidura will go out again on pilgrimage to sacred places. Having said this much, the sage Narada immediately ascended to heaven, and treasuring his words in his heart, Yudhishthira ceased sorrowing. Right?
We can do that.
Yeah. So we leave chapter 3 for Papa to tell us some other day. Om Shri Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai